Bear cub, chained by poachers, begged passing baby for water. The baby's response sparked a revolution. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning sun filtered through the dense pines of Whispering Woods, casting dappled shadows across a narrow hiking trail. The air hung heavy with humidity, carrying the sweet scent of wildflowers and the distant gurgle of a stream. It was along this peaceful path that Nena Reed pushed her daughter Emma's stroller, the 15-month-old babbling happily as she clutched her favorite stuffed bear. Nena paused to check her map. They had ventured farther than planned on their morning walk, but the weather was perfect, and Emma was in good spirits. "Just a bit longer, sweetie," she whispered, brushing a strand of blonde hair from her daughter's forehead. "Then we'll head back for lunch." What Nena couldn't know was that, less than 50 yards away, through a screen of thick brush, something was happening that would change their lives forever. 3 men had established a makeshift camp in a small clearing. Cigarette smoke mingled with the forest air, and empty beer cans littered the ground around a smoldering fire. The men spoke in hushed tones, occasionally erupting in coarse laughter that scared away nearby birds. Chained to a stake driven deep into the earth was a small brown bear cub, no more than 4 months old. Its normally glossy coat was matted with dirt and blood from where the heavy chain had rubbed its neck raw. The cub had been crying for its mother all night, but now its whimpers had grown weak, its small body trembling with exhaustion and thirst. "Shut that thing up," growled Marcus, the oldest of the poachers, flicking his cigarette toward the cub. "Buyer's coming tomorrow morning. Says he'll give us 10 grand for it. Wants it for some private zoo in Dubai." 10 grand, that's it? Victor, the youngest of the 3, frowned. He had only joined Marcus and Dayan on this expedition because he needed money for his sick mother's medical bills. He hadn't expected to feel so terrible about it. "We've been out here for a week for just 10 grand. We got the mother too," Dayan reminded him, nodding toward their truck hidden beneath camouflage tarps. "That's another 40, easy. Now stop your whining and go check the snares. We might catch another before sundown." Victor trudged away, unable to look at the cub any longer. Its eyes, once bright with curiosity, had dulled to vacant orbs. It hadn't had water since yesterday morning, and the summer heat was taking its toll. On the trail, Emma suddenly stopped babbling, her attention fixed on something Nena couldn't see through the trees. The toddler tilted her head, listening intently, then pointed a chubby finger toward the dense undergrowth. "Bay," she said earnestly, "bay." "Yes, sweetheart, trees," Nena replied absently, still studying the map. Emma shook her head vigorously, straining against the stroller straps. "Bah!" she insisted, her voice rising with urgency. That's when Nena heard it too, a faint, pitiful sound, somewhere between a whine and a cry. It was so weak she almost thought she'd imagined it. She froze, listening. There it was again. "What is that?" she whispered, mostly to herself. Every maternal instinct told her something was wrong, very wrong. Emma pointed again, more insistently this time. "Bay hurt," she said, surprising Nena with the clarity of her words. Emma had only recently started forming 2-word phrases. Nena hesitated. The smart thing would be to turn around, head back to the visitor center, report what they'd heard. But the sound came again, weaker this time, and Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Okay, sweetie, we'll look, but we stay quiet, okay?" Nena whispered, unstrapping Emma and lifting her into her arms. She stepped off the trail, pushing aside branches as quietly as possible, following the sound that grew marginally louder as they approached. Through a gap in the foliage, Nena suddenly saw it. the clearing, the men, and the small bear cub chained to the ground. She stifled a gasp, pressing back against a tree trunk. Her heart hammered in her chest as she recognized the scene for what it was, poachers with their catch. She knew she should retreat immediately, call for help. This was dangerous. These men would not hesitate to hurt anyone who threatened their operation. But Emma had seen the cub too. "Bah!" she exclaimed, thankfully not too loudly. Her little face crumpled in distress. "Bay water," she said, pointing to her sippy cup secured in the stroller's cup holder. Nena's blood ran cold as one of the men stood up, stretching. "I'm going to check the perimeter," he announced. "Thought I heard something." She backed away silently. Emma clutched to her chest, her mind racing. They needed to get away quickly and find help. But Emma was squirming now, reaching toward her sippy cup, insisting "bay of water" with increasing distress. And somehow, in that moment, looking at her daughter's concerned face, Nena knew that Emma understood something fundamental that adults often forgot. Suffering demanded immediate action, no matter how small the gesture might seem. What happened next would set in motion events that neither Nena, the poachers, nor anyone in Whispering Woods could have possibly anticipated. Nena's heart pounded as she calculated her options. The forest ranger station was at least 2 miles back, and her phone showed no service bars. If she fled now, the cub might not survive until help arrived. The animal's labored breathing was visible even from this distance, its tiny rib cage heaving with effort under the hot sun. "Shh, Emma, we need to be very quiet," Nena whispered. But Emma was fixated on the suffering cub, her young mind unable to comprehend why anyone would hurt a baby animal. "Bay water, Mama," Emma insisted again, her voice trembling with emotion. She struggled in Nena's arms, reaching toward her stroller where her bright blue sippy cup sat filled with cool water. The poacher named Marcus suddenly turned his head, scanning the trees. "You hear that, Dion?" he asked, reaching for something at his belt. Nena's blood ran cold when she realized it was a hunting knife. "Just the wind," Dion replied dismissively, but he too seemed alert now, his posture tense. "Victor's been gone too long. Go find him." Marcus nodded, grabbing his rifle before disappearing into the trees, thankfully in the opposite direction from Nena and Emma. Nena knew this might be their only chance. With 2 of the poachers away from camp, only one remained. She carefully set Emma back in her stroller, glancing around frantically for anything she could use as a weapon or distraction. Her hiking pack contained nothing more threatening than trail mix and a small first aid kit. That's when she spotted a park ranger's whistle hanging from her backpack. Standard issue for hikers in Whispering Woods. If she could get far enough away and blow it repeatedly, it might bring help. But first, she needed to do something about that cub. "Emma, honey, Mama needs you to be so brave and so quiet, like when we play hide and seek," Nena whispered, her voice shaking. "Can you do that for me?" Emma nodded solemnly, her blue eyes wide. Nena carefully unzipped her pack and retrieved her water bottle. Not Emma's sippy cup, which her daughter might cry for later. Then, with trembling hands, she pulled out her phone and set it to record video, propping it against the stroller to capture whatever happened next. If things went wrong, at least there would be evidence. "Stay here, sweetie. Do not move," Nena instructed firmly, securing the stroller straps. She took a deep breath, then crouched low and began moving through the underbrush toward the clearing, staying hidden behind the thick foliage. Dion had his back turned now, rummaging through a cooler for another beer. The cub lay motionless, its eyes half closed, the chain looking impossibly heavy against its small frame. Nena crept closer, her heart hammering so loudly she feared the poacher might hear it. When she was within throwing distance, she unscrewed her water bottle and waited for her moment. Dayon cursed as he dropped something, bending down to retrieve it. In that instant, Nena flung her water bottle with all her might. It sailed through the air and landed with a soft thud just inches from the cub's head, water spilling onto the parched earth. The sudden movement caught the cub's attention. It lifted its head weakly, nostrils flaring at the scent of water. Nena held her breath as the small animal dragged itself the few inches needed to reach the puddle forming beside the bottle. It began to lap desperately at the moisture. Dayon was still distracted, now attempting to start a small portable radio that emitted bursts of static. The cub drank silently, strength visibly returning to its small body with each lap of water. What Nena didn't notice was Emma, who had somehow unbuckled her stroller straps, a new skill Nena hadn't known her daughter possessed. The toddler slipped out of the stroller and toddled determinedly toward the clearing, her own sippy cup clutched tightly in her hand. Nena only realized what was happening when she heard Emma's voice, clear and innocent, ring out across the clearing. "Bay, more water!" Time seemed to stop. Dayon whirled around, his face contorting with shock, as he spotted the small child walking unsteadily into the clearing. The bear cub looked up, its dark eyes meeting Emma's. And Nena felt her world collapse around her as her daughter stood exposed in front of an armed poacher. "Emma!" Nena screamed, abandoning all pretense of hiding as she burst from the bushes toward her daughter. Dayon recovered from his surprise quickly, his expression darkening. "Where the hell did you come from?" he snarled, reaching for his gun. "Both of you, don't move!" Nena reached Emma and scooped her up protectively, backing away as Dayon advanced on them. "Please," she begged. "We were just hiking. We didn't see anything." "Yeah, right," Dayon scoffed, his knuckles white around his weapon. "Just happened to wander off trail right to our camp? You're coming with me until Marcus gets back. He'll decide what to do with you." Nena's mind raced frantically. There was no outrunning a bullet, and she couldn't risk Emma's safety with any sudden moves. But as Dayon stepped closer, his attention fixed on them, something unexpected happened. The bear cub, revived by the water and sensing the tension, let out a loud, distressed cry, so much stronger than its previous whimpers. The sound echoed through the trees, startling all of them. And from somewhere in the distance came an answering roar, deep, powerful, and unmistakable. The mother bear wasn't dead after all. Dayon's face drained of color. "That's impossible," he whispered. "We tranked her. She's in the truck." The roar came again, closer this time, followed by the sound of crashing undergrowth and panicked shouting. Marcus and Victor running back toward camp. "Dayon!" Marcus's voice was ragged with terror. "She's loose! Run!" Emma, seemingly oblivious to the danger, wriggled in Nena's arms until she could reach down toward the cub. Before Nena could stop her, Emma dropped her sippy cup on the ground beside the chained animal. "Bay, drink," she said firmly. As chaos erupted around them, Dayon cursing, the distant sounds of the mother bear crashing through the forest, Marcus's continued shouts, the small cub nudged the sippy cup with its nose until water trickled out, then drank gratefully. And through the trees burst Victor, the youngest poacher, his face scratched and his clothes torn. He stumbled to a halt when he saw Nena and Emma, confusion and then horror dawning on his face. "A kid? There's a kid here?" he gasped, looking frantically between Nena, Emma, and Dayon. "We gotta get them out of here. The mother bear is coming. She broke out of her cage." Dayon pointed his gun at Victor. "Shut up. No one's going anywhere. This is your fault. You didn't secure the cage properly." "I let her go," Victor admitted, his voice shaking. I couldn't do this. But we need to run now." Another roar, much closer this time. The cub responded with an excited cry. In that moment of confusion, Nena made her decision. Still clutching Emma, she lunged forward and grabbed the stake securing the cub's chain. It had been loosened by the cub's constant pulling and the dry soil. With strength born of pure maternal adrenaline, she yanked it free. "What are you doing?" Dion shouted, swinging his gun toward her. Victor tackled him from behind, sending the weapon flying. "Run!" he yelled at Nena. "Take the kid and go." "I'll hold him." Nena didn't hesitate. With Emma in one arm and the cub's chain in her hand, she fled back toward the trail, the small bear stumbling alongside them, still attached to the chain but no longer anchored to the ground. Behind them, the sounds of struggle gave way to a terrifying crash. The mother bear had arrived at the poachers' camp. Male shouts and roars intermingled in a cacophony of chaos. Nena ran blindly, her only thought to get Emma to safety. The cub, surprisingly, kept pace, perhaps sensing that following them was its best chance at survival. They had just reached the main trail when Nena collided with something solid, a person. She screamed, nearly dropping Emma as strong hands steadied her. "Whoa, easy there," a deep voice said. Nena looked up into the weathered face of a forest ranger. Behind him stood 3 more uniformed figures, all armed with tranquilizer rifles. "Ma'am, you need to get out of here. We've had reports of a—" His words died as he took in the scene. Nena, clutching her toddler, breathless with terror, and beside her a bear cub on a chain. "Please," Nena gasped. "Poachers, back there, mother bear, attack." The ranger's training took over. He immediately radioed for backup and emergency services. "Johnson, escort this woman and her child to safety," he ordered one of his colleagues. "The rest of you, with me." "Wait," Nena said, fumbling for her phone. "I recorded evidence." She handed over her device, still filming. "And the cub—" "We'll take care of the cub," the female ranger named Johnson assured her, carefully taking the chain from Nena's hand. "You've done something incredibly brave, ma'am, but foolish. Let's get you two to safety." As Johnson led them away, Emma twisted in Nena's arms to look back at the cub. "Bye, Bay," she called softly, waving her small hand. The cub watched them go, its dark eyes somehow less vacant now, as if the small kindness had rekindled something that the poacher's cruelty had nearly extinguished. What Nena didn't know as she carried Emma down the trail to safety was that her phone had been live-streaming the entire encounter to her social media account, a feature she'd accidentally activated while setting up the recording. Already, thousands of viewers were watching in horror and fascination as the drama unfolded in Whispering Woods. And back at the poachers' camp, the mother bear stood protectively over her captured cub as rangers cautiously approached with tranquilizers, while nearby, 3 subdued poachers sat handcuffed against a tree, Victor having surrendered willingly, providing crucial information about their operation. But this was only the beginning of a story that would soon captivate the world. A story of a baby's compassion, a mother's courage, and how one small sippy cup of water would spark a revolution. The forest ranger station buzzed with activity as medical personnel checked over Nena and Emma. The toddler seemed remarkably unfazed by the ordeal, babbling happily to the paramedic examining her for injuries. Nena, however, couldn't stop shaking, the reality of what they'd just survived crashing over her in waves. "You're very lucky," said Chief Ranger Owen Parker, a tall man with salt-and-pepper hair and kind eyes creased from years in the sun. "Mother bears are incredibly dangerous when separated from their cubs. I've been working these woods for 20 years, and I've never seen anyone walk away from a situation like that unharmed." "Is the cub okay?" Nena asked, pulling the shock blanket tighter around her shoulders. Ranger Parker nodded. Our wildlife specialist is with it now. Dehydrated and malnourished, but it should make a full recovery. He hesitated, then added, We've been tracking these poachers for months. They're part of an international wildlife trafficking ring. Your evidence might be what finally helps us bring down the whole operation. A young ranger burst into the room, his expression a mix of excitement and disbelief. Chief, you need to see this, he said, thrusting his tablet toward Parker. The lady's phone was live-streaming everything to social media. It's gone viral. Over 2 million views already. Nena's jaw dropped. What? That's impossible. I didn't. Then she remembered Emma playing with her phone that morning. Her daughter must have accidentally activated the livestream feature Nena had used only once before, during Emma's birthday party last month. Parker studied the screen, his eyebrows rising. Comments are pouring in from all over the world. People are calling your daughter a hero. He looked at Emma with newfound respect. And they're demanding justice for the bears. Nena felt overwhelmed. What had started as a simple morning hike had somehow turned into this. She glanced at Emma, who was now contentedly drinking from a new sippy cup provided by the paramedics, completely unaware of her sudden fame. There's more, the young ranger continued. News vans are already at the visitor center. They're asking for interviews. No, Nena said firmly. No interviews, not with Emma. She's just a baby. Parker nodded understandingly. We can handle the press, but you should know. What your daughter did, what you did, it's resonating with people in a way I've never seen before. Sometimes it takes a child's simple act of compassion to wake us all up. 3 hours later, Nena sat in a private office at the ranger station, scrolling through her phone in disbelief. The hashtag number sign, Baby and the Bear, was trending worldwide. Her unintentional live stream had been clipped, edited, and shared across every major platform. News anchors were discussing it, celebrities were tweeting about it, and wildlife conservation organizations were using it as a rallying cry. The door opened, and a woman in a wildlife services uniform entered, accompanied by Ranger Parker. Mrs. Reed, I'm Dr. Amara Okafor, wildlife veterinarian. I wanted to update you personally on the cubs. Cubs? Nena echoed. Plural, Dr. Okafor nodded. We found 2 more in the poacher's truck, both thankfully alive, along with various animal parts. She grimaced. These people have been decimating the local wildlife population for months. What will happen to the cubs? Nena asked. Normally, we'd attempt to reunite them with their mother, but in this case, Dr. Okafor exchanged a glance with Ranger Parker. The mother bear was severely injured in the commotion. She's alive, but she'll need extensive rehabilitation. The cubs will be transferred to a wildlife sanctuary until she recovers. If she recovers. Nena felt a pang of guilt. If they hadn't been there, if Emma hadn't wandered into the clearing. Don't, Parker said firmly, reading her expression. This isn't your fault. These poachers would have killed the mother bear once they were finished. Your presence changed everything for the better. Dr. Okafor sat down across from Nena. Actually, that's what I wanted to discuss with you. The sanctuary where we're sending the cubs is struggling financially. They barely have resources to care for the animals they already have. She took a deep breath. But since your video went viral, their donation page has crashed from too much traffic. People want to help. Nena stared at her, trying to process what she was hearing. Your daughter's simple act of offering water to a suffering animal has touched millions of people, Dr. Okafor continued. It's shown them something essential about compassion that many adults forget. A gentle knock at the door interrupted them. A ranger poked his head in. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here insisting on speaking with Mrs. Reed. Says his name is Victor Chen. Claims he was involved in the incident." Nena tensed. "The poacher who helped us escape?" Parker frowned. "He's in custody. I'll handle this." "No," Nena said, surprising herself. "I want to hear what he has to say." Minutes later, Victor was escorted into the room, handcuffed and looking much younger and more vulnerable than he had in the forest. His eyes were red-rimmed, his shoulders slumped. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said quietly, "for not leaving the cub and—" He swallowed hard. "I'm sorry your little girl had to see any of that. I never signed up to hurt families or children." "Yet you were fine with orphaning bear cubs?" Dr. Okafor asked sharply. Victor flinched. "I needed the money, my mom's medical bills." He trailed off, then shook his head. "That's not an excuse. I made a terrible choice. Seeing your daughter with that sippy cup, trying to help the cub while I was too scared to do the right thing." His voice broke. "I'll never forget it." Nena studied him for a long moment. "You helped us escape. You let the mother bear go." "Too late," Victor said bitterly. "If I'd had any courage, I would have stopped this before it started." He looked up, his expression desperate. "They're saying I could get up to 5 years. I'll take whatever punishment I deserve, but could you tell your daughter someday that I tried to make it right in the end?" Before Nena could respond, Emma's voice called out from the doorway where a ranger was holding her. "Mama!" "Bae?" All eyes turned to the toddler, who was looking expectantly around the room for the bear cub. "No, sweetheart," Nena said gently. "The baby bear is with the doctor getting better." Emma's face fell momentarily, then brightened. She pointed at Victor. "He help Bae?" The simple question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Victor's eyes filled with tears as he nodded slowly. "I tried," he whispered. That exchange, captured by yet another ranger's body camera and later leaked to social media, would become the second viral moment in what news outlets were now calling the bear-cub revolution. The image of a handcuffed young man being forgiven by a toddler who saw only his final good deed, not his initial mistake, struck a chord with viewers worldwide. Meanwhile, in the veterinary facility behind the ranger station, the bear cub that had started it all slowly regained its strength, unaware that its story was changing hearts and minds across the globe, and that the revolution had only just begun. By the next morning, the story had exploded beyond anything Nena could have imagined. She woke in the hotel room provided by the ranger service to find her phone buzzing constantly with notifications. Emma was still asleep in the portable crib the hotel staff had hurriedly arranged, her face peaceful, tiny fingers curled around her replacement sippy cup. Nena scrolled through her messages in disbelief. There were interview requests from major networks, calls from wildlife organizations, and even an invitation to speak at a hastily organized rally in support of stronger anti-poaching legislation. The video had been viewed over 30 million times overnight, with celebrities and world leaders sharing it and commenting. A soft knock at the door made her jump. She opened it to find Ranger Parker holding a tray with coffee and breakfast. "Thought you might not want to brave the lobby," he said with a wry smile. "There are reporters camped out downstairs." "This is crazy," Nena whispered, accepting the tray gratefully. All because Emma wanted to give a bear cub some water. Parker set down a manila folder on the small table. "It's more than that. Your video exposed something many people suspected, but rarely saw firsthand: the brutal reality of wildlife trafficking. And your daughter's simple act of kindness provided a powerful contrast." He hesitated. There's something else you should know. The mother bear, she didn't make it through the night. Nena felt her stomach drop. Oh no. Her injuries were too severe. But, he continued quickly, seeing Nena's distress, her cubs will be well cared for. The sanctuary has received so many donations they're actually expanding their facilities. He opened the folder to reveal printouts of news articles. And there's more. The video has triggered investigations into wildlife trafficking networks in 3 countries. Your footage clearly showed Marcus and Dion's faces, and authorities have identified them as known operatives in an international smuggling ring. Nena sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed. Emma stirred in her crib, blinking sleepily. "Bae?" she asked, sitting up and rubbing her eyes. "No bear today, sweetheart," Nena said softly. "But maybe we can visit the baby bears soon." Parker cleared his throat. "Actually, Doctor, Okafor wanted me to extend an invitation. The cubs are being transferred to the sanctuary this afternoon. She thought Emma might like to see them before they go, under strict supervision, of course." Emma's face lit up at the word bears, though Nena doubted she understood the rest. "There's one more thing," Parker added, pulling a business card from his pocket. "This was left for you at the front desk. A lawyer. Specializes in wildlife crime litigation. Said to call when you're ready to make a statement for the prosecution." Nena studied the embossed card. Suddenly, this wasn't just about a viral video anymore. They were witnesses in what was apparently becoming a major criminal case. "I never wanted any of this," she murmured. "We were just taking a morning walk." Parker's expression softened. Sometimes the most important moments in history happen when ordinary people are just going about their day. Your daughter did something extraordinary in its simplicity. She saw suffering and responded with kindness. No ulterior motives, no hesitation. That's what's resonating with people. Emma climbed out of her crib and toddled over, lifting her arms to be picked up. Nena complied automatically, breathing in her daughter's sweet, sleepy scent. "What do I do now?" she asked, more to herself than to Parker. "That's entirely up to you," he replied. "But whatever you decide, know that your actions yesterday have already set something important in motion." 4 hours later, under the watchful eyes of Dr. Okafor and 2 wildlife specialists, Nena stood with Emma in a special viewing room at the veterinary facility. Through a large window, they could see the 3 bear cubs in a temporary enclosure. The smallest one, the cub Emma had offered water to, was noticeably more active than the day before, exploring its surroundings with cautious curiosity. "Bah!" Emma exclaimed, pressing her hands against the glass. The cub looked up, its dark eyes seemingly locking with Emma's. For a moment, Nena could almost believe there was recognition there, an understanding between 2 young souls who had shared a profound moment. "She remembers you," Dr. Okafor said, smiling. "Bears are incredibly intelligent. She's doing much better today, eating well, drinking plenty of water." "What will happen to them now?" Nena asked softly. "They'll be raised at the sanctuary until they're old enough to be released back into the wild, probably in a different forest, far from poaching activity." Dr. Okafor checked her tablet. "We're naming them for tracking purposes. Would you like to suggest a name for your little friend there?" Nena looked at Emma, who was still entranced by the cub. "Hope," she said after a moment. "Let's call her Hope." Dr. Okafor nodded approvingly. "Perfect, and very fitting considering what's happening." "What do you mean?" The veterinarian showed Nena her tablet, open to a news website. "Your video has sparked protests in 20 countries. People are demanding stricter penalties for wildlife trafficking and better protection for endangered species." A senator just announced plans to introduce legislation strengthening anti-poaching laws. They're calling it the Emma's Law. Nena felt dizzy. This is a lot. It's a revolution, Dr. Okafor said simply, started by a sippy cup. As if on cue, Emma held up her own cup toward the window. "Bay drink," she stated firmly. The cub, now named Hope, approached the window, nose twitching with interest. One of the specialists in the enclosure, noticing the interaction, placed a small dish of water near the glass. Hope lapped at it eagerly, her eyes still seemingly fixed on Emma. Unknown to them, a staff member had captured this moment on camera. By nightfall, this new image of Emma and Hope, separated by glass but connected by an invisible bond of compassion, would join the original video in viral status. News anchors would comment on the beautiful symmetry of it. The child still concerned for the cub's thirst. The cub thriving because of one simple act of kindness. But for Nena, watching her daughter communicate wordlessly with a wild animal, politics and viral fame were far from her mind. She was witnessing something more fundamental, the purest form of empathy, unspoiled by adult cynicism or calculation. Emma saw suffering and responded with kindness. It was that simple, and perhaps that simplicity was exactly what the world needed right now. As they prepared to leave, Nena made her decision. She would not hide from the spotlight that had found them, but use it thoughtfully. Emma's act of compassion deserved to be more than just a fleeting internet sensation. It could be the catalyst for real change. The lawyer's card felt heavy in her pocket as she imagined testifying against the poachers, speaking at wildlife conservation events, ensuring that Emma's simple gesture continued to inspire action. "Ready to go, sweetheart?" she asked, taking Emma's hand. Emma waved at Hope one last time. "Bye-bye, Bay. Be good." Dr. Okafor smiled. "She'll be just fine, thanks to you two." As they walked out of the facility, they were greeted by a small crowd of staffers, all watching them with expressions of admiration and something like hope. News had spread throughout the building about their visit. "What your daughter did," one older man said, his voice thick with emotion. "It reminds us why we do this work. Sometimes we forget, dealing with all the cruelty day after day." Nena nodded, suddenly finding it difficult to speak. She lifted Emma into her arms, drawing strength from her daughter's innocent certainty that helping others was simply what one did, without question or hesitation. Outside, the late afternoon sun bathed the forest in golden light. Somewhere in those trees, poachers still operated. Animals still suffered. But perhaps, thanks to one small girl and her sippy cup, there were now more people paying attention, more people willing to act, more people remembering that compassion was not a luxury, but a necessity. The revolution had begun, and it had started with water, the most basic need, the most fundamental act of kindness, offered freely from the smallest hands. In the days that followed, Nena found herself navigating a strange new reality. Their hotel room became a temporary headquarters as she fielded calls from journalists, wildlife advocates, and government officials. Emma, mercifully, remained oblivious to the storm swirling around her, content to play with the stuffed bear that had mysteriously appeared at their door, sent by an anonymous donor who had seen the video. "I can't believe they want us on Good Morning America," Nena told her sister Lena during a rare quiet moment. She had finally reached out to family, explaining the incredible situation they had stumbled into. "And the Wildlife Conservation Group wants me to speak at their conference next month." "Are you going to do it?" Lena asked through the phone. Nena watched Emma stacking blocks on the hotel room floor, humming to herself. "I think I have to. Not for the attention. You know I hate that, but because it might actually help change things. My sister, the accidental activist, Lena said with a touch of pride. Who would have thought? A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Nena opened it to find Ranger Parker with a troubled expression. There's been a development, he said quietly after Nena let him in. Victor Chen, the young poacher who helped you, his lawyer wants to make a deal. He's offering to testify against the entire trafficking network in exchange for leniency. That's good, isn't it? Nena asked, confused by Parker's somber tone. In theory, yes, but it's complicated. His testimony would implicate some powerful people, including a local judge and several wealthy collectors who purchased the animals. Parker lowered his voice further. People with resources and motivation to make problems disappear. Nena felt a chill. Are you saying we're in danger? I'm saying we need to be cautious. The FBI is involved now. They've been building a case against this network for years. Your video was the break they needed. He glanced at Emma, who was now pretending to give her stuffed bear a drink from her sippy cup. They want to put you both in protective custody until the initial arrests are made. The world seemed to tilt beneath Nena's feet. What had started as a simple act of kindness was escalating into something far more complex and potentially dangerous. How long? She managed to ask. A few weeks, maybe a month. They have a safe house prepared, comfortable, secure. Parker hesitated. I know this is a lot to take in, but these traffickers, they're not just small-time poachers. This is organized crime. The animals they take are worth millions on the black market. Nena sank onto the edge of the bed, trying to process this new reality. She thought of Hope and the other cubs, safe now but orphaned because of human greed. She thought of Victor, who had made a terrible choice but found his conscience at a crucial moment. And she thought of Emma, too young to understand the impact of her simple gesture. We'll do it, she decided firmly. Whatever keeps Emma safe. And if it helps bring these people to justice, all the better. 2 days later, they were settled into a comfortable but isolated cabin outside of town, with round-the-clock security discreetly stationed nearby. The cabin had toys for Emma and a small fenced yard where she could play safely. To Nena's surprise, Dr. Okafor had been granted permission to visit them with updates about the cubs. Hope is gaining weight nicely, the veterinarian reported during her first visit, showing Nena photos on her tablet. The sanctuary built a special enclosure for them, funded entirely by donations that poured in after your video. That's wonderful, Nena said, genuinely relieved. At least something good is coming from all this. Dr. Okafor studied her thoughtfully. A lot of good is coming from this. The conversation around wildlife trafficking has completely changed. People who never gave it a thought before are now paying attention. Because of a baby with a sippy cup, Nena mused, watching Emma play in the yard through the window. Sometimes the simplest gestures are the most powerful, Dr. Okafor replied, which reminds me, I brought something for Emma. She produced a small stuffed bear from her bag, not a generic teddy bear, but a realistic black bear cub. This is from the sanctuary staff. They had it custom-made to look like Hope. Nena accepted the gift with tears in her eyes. Thank you. She'll love it. As predicted, Emma was delighted with the new stuffed animal, immediately introducing it to her original teddy bear as if they were old friends. That night, she insisted on sleeping with both bears tucked in beside her. The days in protective custody stretched into weeks. Nena gave her testimony remotely to grand juries and prosecutors. She learned that Marcus and Dion had both been denied bail, considered flight risks due to their international connections. Victor remained in custody but in a separate facility, cooperating fully with authorities. the FBI had conducted raids in 3 states, seizing animals, documents, and making numerous arrests. Through it all, Emma remained remarkably resilient, adapting to their temporary home with the flexibility of the very young. She asked about Be occasionally, but seemed satisfied with the photo's doctor. Okafor brought during her visits. Then came the night that changed everything again. Nena was awakened by the sound of breaking glass. She bolted upright in bed, heart pounding, instantly alert. A crash from the main room of the cabin sent her flying to Emma's room, where her daughter was somehow still sleeping peacefully, clutching her 2 bear toys. She locked Emma's door from the inside, then pushed the dresser in front of it with strength she didn't know she possessed. Through the window, she could see the security officer who had been stationed outside lying motionless on the ground. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone to dial the emergency number Parker had given her. "Security breach at Safe House Bravo," she whispered urgently when the call connected. "Unknown intruders. Officer down." "Stay where you are," came the immediate response. "Backup is 7 minutes out. Hide and do not engage." More crashing sounds from the main room, followed by hushed male voices. Nena's mind raced wildly. 7 minutes might as well be 7 hours. She looked around frantically for a weapon, finding nothing more threatening than a plastic hairbrush. The doorknob to Emma's room rattled. Nena froze, holding her breath. Then came a hard thump against the door, someone trying to force it open. "Mama!" Emma's sleepy voice called out as she stirred in her bed, awakened by the noise. "Shh, baby," Nena whispered, scooping Emma up and looking desperately for somewhere to hide. The room had no closet, just the dresser now blocking the door and a small bathroom attached. The thumping against the door grew more insistent. The dresser began to inch forward with each impact. Whoever was out there was determined to get in. Nena carried Emma into the bathroom, locking that door as well. Though she knew it wouldn't hold long. She set Emma in the bathtub, wrapping her in towels. "We're playing a very quiet hiding game," she whispered, fighting to keep her voice steady. "You need to be very still and very quiet, like a little mouse." Emma nodded solemnly, her eyes wide but trusting. She clutched her Hope bear toy tightly. A splintering crash from the bedroom told Nena the main door had given way. Heavy footsteps approached the bathroom. She positioned herself in front of the tub, determined to protect Emma with her life if necessary. The bathroom doorknob turned slowly, then rattled as the intruder found it locked. Nena braced herself for the inevitable crash. But instead, a familiar voice called out, "Mrs. Reed, it's Victor Chen. I'm here to help." Nena's mind reeled. Victor, the poacher who had helped them escape in the forest. He was supposed to be in custody. "How do I know it's really you?" she demanded, thinking this could easily be a trick. "Your daughter gave water to a bear cub in a blue sippy cup," the voice replied. "I helped you escape when the mother bear arrived. Please, we don't have much time." Something in his voice, a desperate urgency, convinced Nena. She unlocked the bathroom door to find Victor standing there, looking haggard and fearful. Behind him, 2 men lay unconscious on the bedroom floor. "How?" Nena began. "No time," Victor cut her off. "They found you. Someone in the FBI is compromised. They leaked your location. More men are coming." He glanced at Emma in the bathtub. "You need to get her out of here now." "The security team, all down." They came prepared. Victor handed Nena a set of car keys. "There's a vehicle behind the cabin. Take the service road through the woods. It connects to Highway 16 after 3 miles. He pulled out a phone and pressed it into her hand. "This is clean. Only use it to call the number saved in contacts. Ask for Parker directly. Tell him Black Pine Protocol. He'll understand. Nena stared at him in confusion and growing fear. Why are you doing this? How did you even get here? A sound from outside made Victor glance anxiously toward the window. I made a deal, but not with the prosecutors. With Dr. Okafor. At Nena's bewildered expression, he continued hurriedly. She's been investigating the trafficking ring independently for years. Her brother was a ranger killed by poachers. When she realized there was a leak in the official investigation, she helped me escape protective custody to warn you. This was too much to process. Nena grabbed Emma's coat and her own. Why should I trust you? Victor's expression softened as he looked at Emma. Because your daughter saw something in me worth saving. Now go, I'll hold them off. Nena hesitated only a moment longer before wrapping Emma in her coat and lifting her from the tub. As they moved toward the bedroom door, Emma looked over Nena's shoulder at Victor. Bear man, she said clearly, remembering him from the forest. Victor's eyes filled with tears. Be brave, little one, he whispered. Nena followed Victor's directions, slipping out the back door of the cabin with Emma clutched tightly against her chest. The night air was bitingly cold, and she could see her breath forming clouds in the darkness. True to his word, a nondescript SUV waited behind the cabin, its dark color making it nearly invisible among the trees. As she strapped Emma into the back seat using a booster seat that had thoughtfully been installed, Nena heard shouting from the cabin, followed by a series of crashing sounds. She froze momentarily, wondering what was happening to Victor, but Emma's frightened whimper spurred her into action. They needed to get away. Now. The SUV started smoothly, its headlights off as Nena carefully navigated the narrow service road Victor had mentioned. The dense forest pressed in on both sides, branches occasionally scraping against the windows. Emma, remarkably, had stopped crying and was quietly holding her stuffed Hope Bear, as if drawing comfort from it. It's going to be okay, sweetie, Nena said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. We're just going on a little adventure. After what seemed like an eternity, but was probably only 15 minutes, Nena saw the highway ahead. She pulled onto the deserted road, finally daring to turn on the headlights. Only then did she notice the envelope taped to the dashboard with her name written on it. At the next wide shoulder, she pulled over briefly to open it. Inside was a hand-drawn map and a short note in what she recognized as Dr. Okafor's handwriting. Nena, head to the coordinates marked. It's a research station deep in the national forest, off the grid, and known only to a few trusted colleagues. Victor insisted on going to warn you himself. Trust him. I'll meet you there tomorrow. Keep Emma safe. The truth about the trafficking ring is bigger than we thought. Nena studied the map, memorizing the turns and landmarks before carefully tearing it into pieces and scattering them out the window. Then she pulled back onto the highway, heading north into the mountains as indicated. As they drove through the night, Emma eventually fell asleep in her car seat, still clutching her bear. Nena's mind raced with questions. Who had betrayed them? How high up did this trafficking ring go? And what had happened to Victor back at the cabin? The SUV's gas gauge showed nearly full, which meant they could drive for hours without stopping. Good. The farther they got from the compromised safe house, the better. Just as the first hints of dawn lightened the eastern sky, Nena turned onto a nearly invisible dirt road that matched the description in Dr. Okafor's map. The SUV bounced and rattled over the rough terrain, but its four-wheel drive handled the conditions well. After 3 miles of increasingly rough road, she spotted a small cabin nestled among towering pines. Smoke curling from its chimney. Nena approached cautiously, keeping the engine running in case this too was a trap. But as she drew closer, the cabin door opened and Dr. Okafor emerged, looking exhausted but relieved. "Thank God," the veterinarian said, as Nena carried the still sleeping Emma from the car. "When I didn't hear anything, I feared the worst." Inside the rustic but comfortable cabin, Nena settled Emma on a small bed in a side room before confronting Dr. Okafor. "I need answers," she demanded in a hushed voice, mindful of her sleeping daughter. "What is going on? Who attacked us, and why are you involved in all this?" Dr. Okafor sank onto a wooden chair beside the fireplace. "It's complicated and, frankly, dangerous for you to know, but you deserve the truth." She took a deep breath. "The wildlife trafficking ring we uncovered is just the tip of the iceberg. It's connected to money laundering for several political figures both here and abroad. Your video exposed identifiable faces, people who were supposed to remain anonymous middlemen." "So they tried to silence us," Nena concluded, her blood running cold at how close they had come to disaster. "Yes, and they have people on their payroll in law enforcement, which is why your safe house wasn't safe at all." Dr. Okafor rubbed her temples. "My brother was a ranger who stumbled onto their operation 3 years ago. They made his death look like a hunting accident." Nena sat heavily on the couch opposite Dr. Okafor. "I'm so sorry. I've been gathering evidence ever since," the veterinarian continued. "Working my normal job, but always watching, documenting. Then your video happened, and suddenly everything accelerated. They got sloppy, made mistakes. Victor was one of those mistakes." "What do you mean? He was never meant to be part of their inner circle. They recruited him because he needed money for his mother's medical bills, but he never knew the full extent of what he was involved in. When he helped you in the forest, it was the first time he directly defied them." Dr. Okafor's expression softened. "Your daughter's simple act of compassion affected him deeply, made him question everything." Nena glanced toward the room where Emma slept. "And now? What happened to Victor after we left?" Dr. Okafor's face grew grave. "I don't know. He insisted on being the one to warn you, said it was his chance to make something right." She reached for her phone. "I haven't heard from him since." As if on cue, her phone buzzed with a text message. Dr. Okafor read it quickly, her expression shifting from concern to relief. "It's from my contact in the sheriff's department," she said. "Victor is alive, injured, but alive. They found him at the cabin with 3 unconscious men, apparently members of the trafficking ring. He's in custody again, but safe." Nena felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "What happens now?" "Now," Dr. Okafor said, standing up and moving to a laptop set up on a small desk, "we use the evidence I've gathered, combined with Victor's testimony and your video, to expose the entire operation." She opened the computer and turned it to face Nena. "This is what they don't want people to see." On the screen was a detailed map showing trafficking routes across North America, with key figures identified, including several prominent names Nena recognized from the news headlines. Accompanying the map were financial records, photographs, and transcripts of conversations. A damning collection of evidence meticulously compiled. "I need your help, Doctor," Okafor said quietly. "Your video gave us the momentum we needed. Your testimony could help bring down the entire network." Nena thought of Emma, peacefully sleeping despite the danger and chaos that had enveloped their lives. She thought of Hope the bear cub, orphaned by human greed. And she thought of Victor, who had risked everything to save them. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Dr. Okafor smiled grimly. "First, we get this evidence to people we can trust. Then we tell the world the whole story. Not just about poached bear cubs, but about the powerful figures enabling and profiting from the destruction of our wildlife. Outside, the sun was rising over the mountains, bathing the forest in golden light. In the small bedroom, Emma stirred and called out sleepily for her mother. As Nena went to comfort her daughter, she realized that their simple morning hike had set in motion events far beyond anything she could have imagined. What had begun with a sippy cup of water had evolved into something much larger, a fight against corruption, greed, and environmental destruction. And somehow, improbably, a toddler's act of compassion had become the catalyst for it all. 2 days later, from the safety of the remote cabin, Nena watched on Dr. Okafor's laptop as the story broke worldwide. The evidence had been delivered to 3 trusted journalists simultaneously, ensuring that no single person could be pressured or silenced. The resulting exposé was devastating in its comprehensiveness, implicating not only the poachers but politicians, judges, wealthy collectors, and corrupt law enforcement officials in multiple countries. "It's working, Doctor," Okafor said quietly as they watched news coverage of simultaneous raids being conducted across the country. "They can't cover this up anymore." Emma played contentedly on the cabin floor, arranging pine cones in patterns only she understood, her 2 bear toys watching over her activities. Despite everything, she seemed remarkably untraumatized by their midnight escape, adapting to their new temporary home with the resilience of childhood. Nena's phone, the secure one Victor had given her, rang suddenly. It was Ranger Parker. "You've started quite the revolution," he said when she answered. "The FBI director himself is personally overseeing the investigation now, after several of his agents were implicated." "Is it safe for us to come back?" Nena asked, watching Emma play. "Not quite yet," Parker replied, "but soon. They've made dozens of arrests already, including some very surprised wealthy collectors who thought their money made them untouchable." He paused. "There's something else you should know. The wildlife sanctuary where the cubs were sent, they've been flooded with support. Donations, volunteers, even corporate sponsorships. They're expanding their rehabilitation program and establishing a permanent conservation center. They want to name it after Emma." Nena's eyes filled with tears. She's not even 2 years old. She has no idea about any of this. "Sometimes the purest actions come from those who don't understand their impact," Parker said thoughtfully. "That's what makes them so powerful." After they hung up, Nena sat beside Emma on the floor, helping her arrange her pine cones. Emma looked up with a smile that melted Nena's heart. "Bea, coming home?" she asked innocently. Nena stroked her daughter's hair. "Not exactly, sweetheart. Hope needs to stay in the forest where she belongs, but maybe we can visit her sometimes." Emma seemed to consider this, then nodded seriously. "Bay water," she said, patting her mother's hand, as if to remind her of something important. "Yes," Nena agreed, suddenly understanding the profound simplicity of her daughter's worldview. Everyone needs water. And in that moment, Nena grasped what had resonated so deeply with millions of viewers around the world. It wasn't just the dramatic rescue or the confrontation with poachers. It was the fundamental recognition that all living beings have basic needs deserving of respect, and that even the smallest among us have the power to act on that understanding. 1 week later, when it was finally deemed safe, Nena and Emma returned to civilization, though not to their former quiet life. The story of the baby bear revolution had taken on a life of its own, inspiring conservation efforts, anti-poaching initiatives, and educational programs around the world. At Dr. Okafor's invitation, they visited the wildlife sanctuary where Hope and her fellow cubs were thriving. The sanctuary had indeed been renamed the Emma Reed Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, much to Nena's amazement. A special viewing area had been constructed where visitors could observe the cubs safely, and educational displays explained the dangers of wildlife trafficking and the importance of conservation. As they watched Hope playfully wrestling with another cub, Dr. Okafor handed Nena an envelope. "Victor asked me to give you this. His testimony has been invaluable. They've offered him a reduced sentence and protection in exchange for his continued cooperation." Nena opened the letter carefully, reading the neatly penned words. "Dear Mrs. Reed and Emma, I want to thank you both for changing my life. Emma, you showed me that compassion isn't complicated. It's as simple as offering water to someone who is thirsty. I'll never forget watching you with that sippy cup, reaching out to help when adults who should have known better turned away. I made terrible mistakes, choices I'll regret forever. But in that moment in the forest when I saw your daughter's kindness, something broke open inside me. I remembered who I wanted to be before life got hard, and I started making excuses. I don't know what my future holds, but I've made a promise to myself. Every day, I'll try to be the person Emma saw when she called me Bear Man. Someone who helps, not hurts. The world needs more Emmas. Thank you for raising a child who already knows what took me too long to learn. With deepest gratitude, Victor Chen." Nena wiped tears from her eyes as she finished reading. Emma, noticing her mother's emotion, patted her cheek gently. "No sad, Mama," she said firmly. Nena smiled through her tears. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. I'm proud, so proud of you." Emma turned back to the window, pointing excitedly as Hope approached the glass, curious about the visitors. The cub placed one paw against the barrier, as if reaching out to them. Without hesitation, Emma pressed her small hand against the glass opposite the cub's paw. A photographer from National Geographic, visiting the sanctuary to document the rehabilitation program, captured that precise moment. A toddler and a bear cub, connecting across the barrier that separated their worlds. The image would become iconic, gracing magazine covers and conservation posters worldwide, a symbol of hope and the promise of a new generation's relationship with the natural world. And it had all begun with the simplest gesture of kindness, a baby offering water to a thirsty bear cub. The revolution, sparked by that moment, continued to spread, touching lives across continents, changing laws and attitudes, and reminding a cynical world that compassion, even from the smallest among us, has the power to transform everything. 1 year later, Nena sat in the audience of a special United Nations session on wildlife conservation, watching in awe as representatives from 43 countries signed what was being called the Hope Accord, comprehensive legislation to combat wildlife trafficking across international borders. The treaty established unprecedented cooperation between law enforcement agencies, severe penalties for traffickers, and significant funding for conservation efforts. Emma, now 2.5, sat beside her in a small dress adorned with subtle bear prints, contentedly coloring in a picture book featuring woodland animals. She was still too young to understand the magnitude of what her simple act had set in motion, but around her neck hung a small pendant, a gift from the World Wildlife Federation, shaped like a bear paw print. "It's quite remarkable," whispered Sofia Mendez, the renowned environmental attorney who had helped prosecute the trafficking ring. "In 20 years of conservation law, I've never seen governments move this quickly on anything." Nena nodded, still sometimes struggling to believe that their lives had taken such an extraordinary turn. All because a toddler offered water to a thirsty cub. "Sometimes the simplest acts reveal the most profound truths," Sophia replied, watching as yet another diplomat stepped forward to sign the document. "Your daughter reminded the world that compassion isn't a luxury. It's a necessity for survival. After the ceremony, they were approached by a distinguished-looking woman in her 60s, her silver hair pulled back in an elegant knot. "Mrs. Reed, I'm Senator Eleanor Richards. I wanted to personally thank you and Emma for your inspiration. The American delegation wouldn't have pushed for such strong measures without the public pressure that followed your story." Nena shook the senator's hand, still uncomfortable with the attention but gradually growing accustomed to her unexpected role as an advocate. "We just happened to be in the right place at the wrong time," she said modestly. "Perhaps," Senator Richards replied with a knowing smile, "but what your daughter chose to do in that moment, wow, that was extraordinary." She crouched down to Emma's level. "Those bears are very lucky you came along, young lady." Emma looked up from her coloring book. "Bears need water," she stated matter-of-factly, as if explaining something obvious to the adults. The senator laughed appreciatively. "Yes, they certainly do. And now, thanks to you, more of them will have it." She straightened up. "Mrs. Reed, we're hosting a reception this evening for the conservation organizations that helped make today possible. I hope you'll both attend." After the senator moved on, Nena checked her phone to find a message from Dr. Okafor, who was now heading the expanded research division at the Emma Reed Wildlife Center. The message contained simply a photo. Hope and her 2 companion cubs, now significantly larger, exploring a protected wilderness area where they had recently been relocated. The bears looked healthy and alert, their natural wariness of humans thankfully restored through careful rehabilitation. Nena showed the photo to Emma, who pointed excitedly. "Babe, big?" "Yes, Hope is growing up strong, just like you," Nena agreed, marveling at how quickly both her daughter and their bear cub friend had developed over the past year. That evening at the reception, Nena found herself in conversation with environmental leaders, diplomats, and celebrities who had lent their voices to the cause. Despite the high-profile attendees, Emma remained the center of attention, handling it with surprising composure for a toddler. "We've received pledges for over $30 million in private funding," announced the director of a major conservation foundation. "Corporate sponsors who never touched a wildlife causes before want to be associated with the baby bear revolution. It's unprecedented." As Nena listened to plans for new wildlife corridors, advanced anti-poaching technology, and educational initiatives, she spotted a familiar face across the room. Ranger Parker, now promoted to Chief of Conservation Strategy for the National Park Service, looking distinctly uncomfortable in a formal suit instead of his usual uniform. He made his way over, greeting Nena with a warm handshake. "Still can't believe I'm wearing a tie because a baby gave a bear some water," he joked. "How are things back at Whispering Woods?" Nena asked, having kept in touch with the ranger who had been so crucial during their ordeal. "Transformed," Parker replied. "Visitation is up 300%, all people wanting to see where it happened. We've channeled that interest into the new Conservation Education Center." He lowered his voice. "And the poaching rates are down 70% across the region. Turns out having the world's attention focused on your forests is quite the deterrent." A gentle tap on Nena's shoulder turned her attention to a new arrival, Victor Chen, looking remarkably different in a tailored suit, his face more mature but his eyes calmer than when she had last seen him. "Mrs. Reed," he said formally, clearly uncertain of his welcome. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Victor!" Nena exclaimed, genuinely pleased to see him. "Not at all. I didn't expect to see you here." Victor smiled tentatively. "My testimony helped bring down most of the trafficking network. The prosecutor recommended probation instead of prison time." He hesitated. "They've asked me to work with anti-poaching education programs. talking to young people about how easy it is to get pulled into things that violate your own values. That's wonderful, Nena said sincerely. Emma, who had been distracted by a dessert tray, suddenly noticed Victor and pointed excitedly. "Bear, man!" Victor's composure briefly cracked, emotion washing over his face as he knelt to Emma's level. "You remember me?" Emma nodded solemnly, then reached into her small purse to extract her most prized possession, a folded photograph of herself with Hope at the sanctuary. She handed it to Victor as if bestowing a great treasure. "For you," she said decisively. Victor accepted the photo with trembling hands, studying it for a long moment before carefully tucking it into his inner jacket pocket, directly over his heart. "Thank you, Emma. I'll keep it forever." Later that night, after Emma had fallen asleep in their hotel suite, Nena stood at the window overlooking the city lights. Her phone buzzed with news alerts about the Hope Accord signing, with many outlets featuring photos of Emma at the ceremony. The headlines varied, but carried similar themes. Toddlers' compassion, Sparks' global conservation movement, and Hope Accord, how a sippy cup changed the world. Nena reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past year, from their terrifying escape from the compromised safe house to the international spotlight they now occupied. She thought about the complex web of wildlife trafficking they had unwittingly helped expose, reaching into corporate boardrooms and political offices far removed from the forest where 3 poachers had chained a bear cub. Her life had been transformed in ways she never could have imagined. She had left her job as a graphic designer to work full-time with wildlife conservation organizations. She had testified before Congress, spoken at universities, and consulted on children's educational programs about empathy for animals. There was even talk of a documentary film following Hope's rehabilitation and release. But through it all, Nena had worked to ensure that Emma remained, as much as possible, a normal child, playing, learning, growing, without being burdened by her accidental fame. They still went on hikes in the woods, though now with a deeper appreciation for the fragile balance of nature and humanity's responsibility toward it. As she gazed at the stars visible even through the city's light pollution, Nena thought about all the parents around the world who had shown their children the video of Emma offering water to Hope. How many conversations had it sparked? How many children now looked at animals differently, with greater empathy and understanding? The world was changing, slowly but surely. New conservation laws were being enacted, trafficking networks disrupted, habitats protected. And while many factors had contributed to this shift, it had all begun with one simple moment of compassion, a moment that reminded humanity of its better nature. Nena turned from the window to check on Emma, sleeping peacefully with her stuffed bears tucked under each arm. Tomorrow, they would visit the United Nations Wildlife Exhibition, where Hope's story was featured prominently. Next month, they would attend the groundbreaking for a new wildlife corridor that would allow bears and other animals to safely migrate between protected habitats. The work was ongoing, the revolution still unfolding. But tonight, watching her daughter sleep, Nena felt a profound sense of peace. Emma had shown the world that even the smallest hands could offer help, that compassion needed no special training or expertise, only the willingness to see suffering and respond with kindness. And that, perhaps, was the most revolutionary idea of all. 5 years later, a 7-year-old Emma stood nervously at the edge of a clearing in a remote part of the national forest. Beside her, Dr. Okafor adjusted monitoring equipment, while Nena checked the camera settings on her professional wildlife photography gear, a new career she had developed in the years following their life-changing encounter. "Remember, we need to stay very quiet," Dr. Okafor reminded them softly. "She might not come at all if she senses too many humans." Emma nodded solemnly, her blue eyes wide with anticipation. She had grown into a thoughtful child with an uncanny connection to animals and a maturity beyond her years. Her fame as the bear cub girl had gradually faded from public consciousness, though the conservation movement she had sparked continued to gain momentum worldwide. They waited in silence for nearly an hour, the forest alive with smaller sounds, birds calling, insects buzzing, leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. Emma remained impressively still, showing none of the restlessness typical of children her age. Then, subtly, the forest's rhythm changed. Birds fell quiet. The underbrush at the far side of the clearing moved slightly, and into the dappled sunlight stepped a magnificent young female black bear, her coat glossy and her movements confident. She paused, testing the air with her sensitive nose, then proceeded cautiously toward the berry bushes at the clearing's edge. "Is that?" Emma whispered. Dr. Okafor nodded, checking the readings on her tablet. "Yes, that's Hope. The tracking data confirms it." Nena raised her camera, capturing the moment as tears blurred her vision. The malnourished, dehydrated cub they had found chained in the forest had grown into this healthy wild bear, living free in protected habitat that might not have existed without her story. Hope showed no recognition of the humans observing her, which was exactly as it should be. The rehabilitation had been successful. She was fully wild now, wary of human presence, able to forage and eventually raise cubs of her own. As they watched Hope methodically strip berries from the bushes, Emma reached for Nena's hand. "She doesn't remember us," she said quietly, not with disappointment but with understanding. "That's good," Nena replied. "It means she's where she belongs." Emma nodded. "But we remember her." "We always will," Nena agreed. After Hope had eaten her fill and disappeared back into the forest, they packed up their equipment in contemplative silence. The brief encounter represented the completion of a circle, the endangered cub rescued and returned to the wild, now thriving in her natural habitat. On the hike back to their vehicle, Emma stopped near a small stream. She knelt beside it, watching the clear water flow over smooth stones. "Mom, can we do more?" she asked suddenly, looking up with an expression that reminded Nena vividly of the determined toddler who had once insisted on giving water to a suffering cub. "More?" Nena echoed, though she suspected she knew what her daughter meant. For the animals, for the forests. Emma gestured around them at the protected wilderness. "There are still poachers in other places. Still animals that need help." Nena knelt beside her daughter. "Yes, there are. And yes, we can always do more." Emma dipped her fingers in the stream, watching the water flow around them. "I want to be a doctor for animals, like Dr. Okafor or a ranger like Mr. Parker." Dr. Okafor, overhearing, smiled. "You have plenty of time to decide, Emma, but whatever you choose, you've already done more for conservation than most people do in a lifetime. All because you offered water to a thirsty cub," Nena added softly. Emma considered this, then shook her head. Not just because of that, because everyone helped after. Victor and the Rangers and you and all the people who saw the video." She looked between the adults with wisdom beyond her years. One person can start something, but everybody has to help for it to work. As they resumed their hike, Nena reflected on her daughter's insight. The baby bear revolution had indeed begun with one small gesture, but its lasting impact came from the countless people inspired to take action in its wake. From lawmakers and conservationists to ordinary citizens reevaluating their relationship with the natural world. What Emma had started with her sippy cup had grown into something far greater than one child or one bear cub. It had become a movement, a shift in consciousness, a reminder that compassion was not just a personal virtue, but a collective responsibility. And somewhere in the forest behind them, Hope, living embodiment of that revolution, continued her wild life, free and thriving, a testament to what was possible when humanity embraced its better nature. The revolution, sparked by a baby's compassion, had changed laws, protected habitats, and saved countless animal lives. But perhaps its greatest achievement was in changing hearts and minds, reminding a world grown cynical and disconnected that even the smallest among us could make a profound difference when moved by simple kindness. In offering water to a thirsty bear cub, Emma had unleashed a wellspring of hope that continued to flow, nourishing a movement that grew stronger with each passing year. Proof that sometimes the most revolutionary act is also the most elemental, seeing suffering and responding with compassion.